It's a myth that you have to raise a bunch of VC funding to build a great business and a great product. You can bootstrap your way to success. Today, we're talking with Greg Head, who has helped dozens of companies that need a little bit of help figuring out how to bootstrap and get their way from 0 to 1 and 1 to 100. We're going to learn from him how to build a great product, some of the common challenges, and how to scale your business without a bunch of VC funding. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. Today on Product Driven, we're talking with Greg Head, who runs a peer group for 40 different SaaS founders. We're going to be talking about the common problems that they have with building a product, running a company, growing and scaling a SaaS business. At the end of the day, they're product companies. Product is at the heart of what they do. And Greg's got a long history himself of working in and around the industry. And on a weekly basis, I'm sure has some beers and tears with some of these companies about a lot of common problems.
Yep.
Greg, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Matt, good to see you. Always good to see you.
So how would you best describe Practical Founders? Huge fan of what you do, your podcast, your newsletter, your peer groups. How would you best describe it?
Well, I'm a longtime software entrepreneur, leader since 30 years, and I've grown two companies to 100 million. These days, I help serious SaaS founders all over the world who are building valuable software companies without VC funding. I played that game, but that's how I define what I call practical founders. And I have a podcast interviewing successful practical founders and peer groups for, 5 different peer groups for CEOs to be part of, paid peer groups. And I also advise, and I'm active like you are, contributing and so forth. So practical founders create valuable software companies without VC funding. So it's not just bootstrapping and do it yourself and fund it out of your own business or your savings or your time. There's a bunch of ways you can get a little capital to grow and be more efficient without signing up with an institutional investor.
So most of these companies that you work for, they're all SaaS companies, right?
Yeah. B2B SaaS.
So most of these companies, I'm curious from the genesis of them, are most of them people that had their own business idea, they're trying to solve their own problem, couldn't find the right solution to it, and ended up solving it themselves?
Well, it's pretty common. So about half of software companies are industry focused, and about half of the founders I work with are industry focused. And the typical scenario there is I came out of that industry, I saw the problem kept going away. Nobody else was going to fix it. So I stopped doing it to go fix it and take responsibility for that. So that's pretty typical in vertical industry-focused software companies these days that serve just the dermatology industry or just booster clubs, for U.S. high schools or something like that. So that's very typical. Also typical, solving a marketing problem or something else.
That's cross-vertical.
So most founders, it's kind of a myth. You're 23 years old and you start it. Most people wander around and find problems in the world. So in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they say, I finally got to go get after it. But they see a clear problem, and at least part of the answer is software. Sometimes there's other things.
Because they have deep industry and product knowledge that they can go leverage to build a product, and that sort of becomes their unfair advantage, right? Like, I think that's one of the keys of being a startup founder is you need some kind of unfair advantage. Like, why are you going to be successful and other people aren't doing the exact same thing? And usually it's their industry experience.
Right. And look, I'm an industry experienced expert playing in my industry, and I could say things, talked to 5,000 founders in the last, 10 years, spent 30 years doing it myself, grew two companies to 100 million, interview people on my podcast. I'm inside 40 SaaS businesses, doing therapy and strategic work with founders every month. So yes, it's that same kind of, I'm right there this week with these guys. And that's, so there's a trick to making product. It isn't just coding and the rest, and you're quite familiar with this. This is not just the coding problem, which is getting easier. It's figuring out what is so darn valuable, what to do first. What will be visible and apparent to people? How do I get them from where they are to the epiphany? That's all quite tricky in the software development game.
Well, most of these founders struggle with that, right? They're like, well, like for example, this week I was at a pitch contest. There was a great guy there who started a company for veterinarian for
Yep.
dogs, like dental records. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is great. He wants to go solve the problem. Doesn't know anything about building software. Doesn't know anything about building a product, right? It's like
Yeah.
even though you got a great idea, you've got some unfair advantage of like, okay, I understand the industry. I am a
Network.
veterinarian.
Yeah.
I know people I can sell the software to, but I don't know how to build the product. So I'm curious from the companies that you work with, like how do they solve that? How do they go from like, okay, I have an idea, I have like a high level company vision and product vision.
Right.
How do I translate that to somebody else to actually build this thing?
Well, there's a variety of ways. There's no one way to do it. But one of the ways that these industry focused people say there's a big problem. I talked to 100 other veterinarians. They say they would buy something like this if I had it. I pantomimed the software in front of them. So now I need to build software. That's a classic one where the industry entrepreneur doesn't really understand how tough it is to build product and how detailed you need to be. And they're really surprised when
It sounds easy. 100
yeah.
people said they would buy it.
I mean, it's a 20-minute whiteboard conversation. Why can't you build, a whole product around it? So those people get weeded out, or they get over the hump of, oh my God, I thought it was going to take a few months, and it took us a year and a half, and I had to spend hours and hours explaining what this really is and how that really works and so forth. So that's the hump you can get over, and you can figure it out. Most people don't, but that's one.
It's not as easy as hiring a software developer though.
Right, or that agency or that guy or something like that. So
'Cause
usually
they don't know.
usually that agency or that guy or whatever, and that 20-minute whiteboard conversation, we can build something for you, creates the sunk cost of crap. I spent 50 grand and to prove to myself that unless I really get all over this, I'm not going to build anything valuable. So there, some founders get over that. Other founders are technical founders, the
Yes.
non-industry folks like you. You say, I see a problem out of your developer land, and you like Stackify, you built that, and you start building it and see what comes up. So that's another way to do it. And that's actually pretty magical because in one brain, if you can do it, you can see the customer problem and all the dimensions of that and how you're going to get to them and where they're going to start and what you need to build and all the things you could build and what you need to build first. And you kind of have a vision in one brain,
Right.
which can work. That's kind of magical, but usually isn't one brain to do that. You could do that, Matt, but almost nobody else can do that. So then the communication problem happens about translating what I think the business problem is to what is the product definition and scaling, building something. And, another common problem, of course, getting started is this veterinary has, he's been making lists of what this magical mature product is going to be and what he can get built in a 6 months or a year and start selling is some fraction of that. So just understanding that, yes, you think you have the next 10 steps of the roadmap figured out. You don't, because you're going to get in the real world and discover it. But it's a magic trick to figure out what is that 10% of all the things you could build that solves the most acute problem to get customers to say, that is a great start. I want that. I'll pay for it. It solves a problem. I'll keep paying for it. That's harder than it looks. Almost, 10% of founders who have an idea actually get to something where a customer says, thank you. It solves a problem.
So let me ask you this. So out of all the companies that go through Practical Founders,
Yeah.
You've worked with dozens or
Yeah.
maybe hundreds of companies at this point.
Yeah, sure.
Do most of them have a technical co-founder? Like, what would you say? What is the percentage of that?
Well, I have two groups of 8 of SaaS founders, like 250,000 to $1 million ARR. So they're getting on the field, finding product market fit, thrashing about, founders doing most things. About half of those have some kind of team or partner or whatever that does it, and the entrepreneur works with them. So it isn't a technical co-founder.
It's not a co-founder,
or
okay.
the founder themselves isn't. So that's pretty common these days. Used to be you had to have a technical co-founder and lots of engineers to start. That's why VC funding was more common or required back in the olden days. And Others have a technical founder on the team. They're mostly technical and they're learning the sales business side of things. So, yeah, I see both sides of that. And both can work. It's not, it's generally more useful if one founder understands the customer, the market, the business, the selling, the revenue, the getting the business going, which eventually becomes the hard part. But in the beginning, getting product built is really freaking hard, and most people have no idea. But when a technical leader and a business leader, the technical leader understands what's in the business and the possibilities there, the
Yeah.
palette, and the business leader understands deeply into the tech, and they're two brains pushing on the same problem. That's really powerful.
Well, so let me ask you this. So a lot of startups think they need to go hire a CTO or fractional CTO,
Yeah.
and they never say that they need to hire a product person or a fractional product person.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thought of which one is maybe more important. Or like, hey, I could hire any developers, but if I really need the product person to make it go,
Right.
versus did I have to find just the right
Right.
CTO that also happens to be a product person, or do I end up with a CTO that again, like they're great in engineering software and architecting software, but they still don't get the product part of it?
Yeah. Well, this has changed forms over the years, but product people tend to come after you have some salespeople and some coders, right? You're building stuff that people say
But
they
is that
want.
what's wrong?
What's that?
But is that what's wrong? Should we actually like should the product person be the first hire?
Well, CTOs or early stage product, engineering leaders, CTO is like a big thing. I got multiple teams that I need a CTO, but a fractional CTO says, I'm going to handle some product, I'm going to handle some engineering, I'm going to handle some architecture, I'm going to handle, the interface to customers and to the business to figure out if what we're building is to make sense. So it's generally tucked into there. Yes, you need coders, but and sometimes that's thrown in as UI design. Most
Yeah.
founders procrastinate strategic things like product and UI. They just, in the beginning, it was just salespeople and coders. If you could sell it, and you go run to the engineer and try to pantomime it, and then they say we can build that, and I'm not opposed to that. That's another way to get on the field and just see without overthinking it too far, because founders need to get in revenue and then need to get paying customers to prove that there's something there and to follow that trail. And some founders will go think for a year about all of it as opposed to
Yeah.
get them on the field. And so I could argue on that one both ways, but what a non-technical founder needs more is alongside of can you build it, coders, senior people that can architect it, junior people that can just build stuff out, is somebody that understands product and UI and so forth. The standard, Matt, is so freaking high for software quality. Like 20 years ago, Windows software was crappy, it was buggy, but if it did something, you bought it and put up with it. Now everything looks magically delicious, including AI and modern and so forth. So
The
a
user
lot of that's
experience is
getting easier, but the the product experience is the magic
yep.
trick. I mean, this is a software company, so founders and teams that don't take it seriously enough don't make it. So the ones that are over the hump, I have three groups of founders between 1 and 10 million, and they're doing various versions of adding product. The founder is usually the product leader. They
Yeah.
really discover they're the one who can answer. Is this should we call it this or this? And is the dialog box work like this or this? The founder usually can answer that, or they should be able to. So, and that's usually one of the last things to get delegated off of a founder's plate. They can delegate the frontline sales, they can delegate the technology, they can delegate invoicing, they can delegate other things like that, but they generally hang on to the product leaders. So the founders that succeed have deep connection to their customers in
Right.
whatever way they do that, and a really deep commitment to their product. Yeah, they don't know the code. So I'm one of those people that's freakish about the matrix, including the product and how it all fits together.
So let me ask you back to your cohorts that you work with.
Yeah.
What are the biggest struggles they have when they're going from kind of zero to the first 2 or 3 million a year in revenue? Like from a product perspective,
Yeah.
what are their biggest struggles?
Well, they getting to a million ARR, as you know, is roughly about the time where you say, of everybody we could sell to, now we know we should just sell to these people in this market. And of all the things we could build, we're pretty clear these are the next most important things we build. So you kind of have that product market fit identity, kind of thing that you say, you stop running around and making stuff up over a weekend, that your brother codes, or the guy codes or something like that to see if it'll work. And there's a reasonable amount of experimentation that you need to do just to see, right? So I don't think you can discover all of that by just thinking about it and getting it right. So you have to go back and forth. So, but as they get above 1 or 2 million, their definition of what the product is and what their business is and how they sell it and who they're going and why they're different and valuable and so forth, they have some shape around that. And the founder isn't always doing all the selling and all the website work and everything. So there's a little bit more of a team. So teamness happens. And when you bring in your first real senior dev or a fractional CTO or something like that, you realize how much bubblegum and baling wire is in your code just to get your first $1 million customer,
Sure.
which I'm not opposed to. That's not a bad thing. It fixed the, UI that you cobbled together really quickly. You got to fix some architecture. You got to fix some stuff. And again, you can't get it perfect. If you think about it so hard and get the perfect architect, you're gonna fail anyway. You got to hurry up and sell something and see what works. So they're usually doing that transition and going from a couple guys that sit next to you at WeWork building this thing, or in the Philippines or whatever, to 7 people is it's hard. It's hard in sales. It's hard in dev. It's hard in all that. So things slow down a little bit. The roadmap you can't just do stuff over a weekend anymore. You realize there's good coders, bad coders. A bunch of my founders in the 1 to 10 million ARR recurring revenue zone this year we had a big season of new customers and our software fell over. It needed to be re-architected really quickly to scale up.
Yeah.
Right when they got punched in the face. So we need more developers. So we're using companies like Fullscale. We're offshoring a portion of our team and augmenting our teams. That's another thing they're all going through. And, in 1 to 10 million, it doesn't happen in a year or two, usually, or almost never. And if you got a $10 million software company, it's chances are you've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
And you got to start throwing away some stuff that needs to change and, update code.
And the industry has changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, fortunately, in SaaS, it didn't change too drastically. Yes, we went from on-prem to cloud hosting, and we added mobile, and interfaces got better, and there's payments technologies, and other APIs that you can plug in, and so forth. But a 10-year-old software company, they've got 50% of the code they'd love to change today, and they're working on it, something like that, to keep it up. Product is important for any kind of software company, meaning your software product, the code, we're in the software product darn business. So you have to be really intense about it. And sometimes, some complicated B2B software, people buy that veterinary dental thing without really understanding all of what it is, or an accounting software, they don't have to double check the interface. But when they get the demos, they want to see that it's understandable, it's clear, and those are the things that, especially in vertical markets, if the product side, not just how the code works behind the scenes, if the product is clear and strong and useful and fast and all that good stuff for users, in a vertical market, that's the ones that people say, you should use this dental software. The other one sucked. We tried it and it sucked. So in the long run, truth will out about your product. So,
well,
yeah.
You bring up a good point that for most of these companies, referrals is kind of the backbone of growth,
Yes.
right? And at the end of the day, having a good product drives referrals. Like we even see that at Fullscale, right? If we put in a really good software developer at a company, the odds that we will get referrals is really high. If we put somebody that's not super great, we are not going to get referrals, and that account is not going to grow.
Yeah.
And then you're fighting churn, and you can't outrun the churn.
Yeah, you can't outrun it with VC funding or not. So it's silly to spend all this time and money recruiting customers that won't stay. So, and the bigger you get, the more that is, hits you like a 2x4. You can't grow to past 10 million without solving churn problems, no matter how much money you have or whatever. But I'll raise the bar on you, Matt. It's not just having good product or good enough product. That isn't even enough these days. It has to be great enough, as I've always said. Not great, everything's perfect. But for that customer, they need to say, man, this is amazing. Like you and I both use this Riverside software.
Yeah.
And like they had some stuff and we're like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And, somebody say, here's a free one. This isn't very expensive, but, for recording podcasts, here's a free one. No, thanks.
No.
Like, this is great enough for me. Not everything's perfect, but like nailed it. And that's where word of mouth spreads. You can't get to 10 million, especially in a vertical market where everybody's talking to each other at the conferences and they know each other and so forth. But you can't get there unless customers are staying and telling their friends and people start coming to your business who you didn't buy with expensive marketing. And that's one of the reasons why, you don't need VC funding to build software these days. VC funding used to help you get your first 10 engineers, which you needed to build software, and then a stack of servers, which you needed to do something internet-y, and then your first 10 salespeople you need to go to market. But you don't need that these days. So, but there's a high bar for product, and it doesn't change. And maybe that'll change with AI too. It'll be a new level of great enough, which we see those, stories about I used AI and every engineer is 70% better or whatever. Well, that doesn't work for everybody, but for
that's what the marketing hype wants you to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has to be great enough. Like for that veterinary dental tracking thing, it could be a lot of, I don't know, I got to get the photos and then I got to do it here. And like your dentist might have to call out all the teeth and things like that. And if I have to do that manually, like you might have done it 10 years ago and drag a photo over and click a bunch of things, like it's not going to work. It has to be kind of magic, which is I take a few pictures, I say a few things, and magically, it tells me what's wrong and,
well,
I can see what happened the last time your dog was in and
you highlight a good point that I've heard before. Like every software product needs to have some form of feature that is almost indistinguishable from magic. Like there needs to be something about the product that is that magical thing.
Yeah, and the classic version as well, that's a great quote, that something there has to be 10 times better than the other way you do it, which is either other software, which is sometimes pretty good, or manually, which sometimes works, or whatever. So that's the promise of AI. It's the magic is going to show up and it's going to be 100 times better. I don't know. That's why VC funding's chasing it. I'm more practical about it. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there. I do know somebody in the dental software business that is doing that the dentist runs in and checks your teeth and does a little analysis and makes a recommendation and so forth using voice and AI and, the system. And there's sufficient magic in there where doctors say, they look at it and say, that works. I would never do it the old way again. And then you get to that hump and the product is just great enough. So.
Well, tell me a little bit more about the VC market and these practical founders that you work with. I mean, so most all the people that you work with have raised, maybe a little bit of money, maybe $1 million or $2 million or something like that, but they don't go raise big VC money usually, right?
A lot bootstrapped out of their own savings, their own time, building a product, another business where they invested time and people out of their own business. So about half of them don't have any outside funding in the founders that I work with, which is pretty typical of, I would say, the hidden majority of the software game. These are most software companies. By far, the exception of the exception is a VC-funded one that gets to $1 billion. That's actually 1% of 1% of all VC funded, which is a minority there. So,
but everybody thinks that's the way because that's what they're doing in TechCrunch.
And it used to be more common. But now you don't need it. And you and I are both like, stay off the drugs. It's way better. Just build great enough product.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So of all the companies that are in your peer groups, at what stage would they need to get to where you would go to them like, no, you guys need to go raise VC? Like, because you have done X, Y, and Z, you need to go raise all this money?
Well, the only reason you need to, because founders shouldn't need to, if they need money and they're running out of money and they need funding, that's a bad reason to get VC. It's like taking opioid drugs. It's not going to work out very well. But if you're growing so fast, I mean, VC funded companies, imagine getting to 1 million, you find something. VCs are investing in companies. That clapping for VCs and the pitches and everything, they're really, all that pitch deck, pitch competition you went to in Kansas City yesterday, they're chasing companies that are going to double or triple every year in revenue for the next 5 years to hurry up and get to about $100 million business that's worth about $1 billion. Like there's practical versions that say, gosh, it'd be great to you if you got to 10 million and you sold it for 50. But almost no no institutional fund can make money with that. So they kind of pat you on the head and say, that's kind of stupid lifestyle business and all that. But that's the majority of software companies. That's the majority of how founders win in these days. So if you scrap something together and you found something great enough and you get it going and it's starting to explode and you need to add salespeople to triple, and hurry up and get to 100 million, that's a good reason to raise VC funding. That's actually why VC funding exists. The problem is they're spraying all this investment onto a portfolio of opportunities to see if any of them will turn into those blockbusters. And 1 out of 10 in their portfolio, they talk to thousands of companies, invest in 10. One of them, they want to get to 100 million that pays back $1 billion. That's their game. And the 7 out of 10 don't pay back anything for the founder. The founder walks away with 0. So that's just a different game. But there's a place for it in the world. I've played that game. I've won that game. I've done that double thing to 100 million, which was the exit point, if you took VC funding 20 years ago. It's just, it's not needed. It's really risky. It's an all or nothing bet. You start to take 2 or 5 or 10 million in VC funding. You got to drive this thing to 100 million fast or hit the wall, and all or nothing.
Especially if you're giving up a lot of control and they're really pushing you to.
I don't even think it's about the control, although you got people living with you now telling you how to do things, and we got to grow fast, and you always have to grow fast. So it's just about the risk. It's an all or nothing bet. And it's not even about the dilution. It's about, 70% of VC funded software companies, the founder walks away with 0. 50% of the time the company doesn't exist. And if founders say, well, it's worth a try and we'll see if we can make a blockbuster. And if it isn't, we'll go do something else. That's not how founders usually see it, though. So that's how the VCs see it.
Well, and in the reality on the other side, like the companies that you work with, the odds of them having some kind of outcome where they walk away with a couple $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, whatever, is way, way higher.
Yeah. If you get a software company to $1 million in ARR and it works and you got sticky customers and you know how to sell the next customers and you grow at 30% a year, something like that, you have people on your LinkedIn asking to buy your company for $5 million every single day. And if you grow it to $5 million and you have a healthy growing software company, whether you raised a little bit of angel funding or friends and family or a little bit of SaaS debt or royalty-based funding or something, there's other practical versions of funding that aren't institutional VCs. But if you've got a software company to 5 million ARR, and you know this, it's worth 25 to 50 million to the kinds of people that acquire those companies these days, which is mostly private equity and private equity-backed companies that are buying practical steamroller, flywheel, break-even, profitable, improvable, scalable businesses. So on the VC side, if you raise 20 million in your Series A and you don't get to 100 million, there's no IPOs effectively right now. And I did that game way back when. And there's no big, crazy strategic exit. So where do you go to get your unicorn exit? It's not really happening these days. So private equity buying most of the companies, and some strategics are out there, but everybody's pretty practical about the game. So, and that's founder scale. 25 million to a founder or 2 founders, or 50 million to 2 founders, where they had friends and family in it, and they also won a prize, and they get to split the difference. That is life-changing wealth, and you could be, the coolest kid in Kansas City. doing that, some version of what you did a couple times. And if you get to $1 million, the odds of you getting to 5 million are actually really good if you don't have VC funding. The odds of you getting to 5 million ARR and having a successful exit, with VC funding are really low. So regardless of your equity dilution and having boards and that rigmarole.
Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today, and I appreciate your insights in not only to all the product stuff, but also the VC game. And I'm with you. I am not a fan of the VC stuff. I mean, I could see you raising a seed round or maybe $1 million or something like that, getting the business, off the ground. Like, I can understand and appreciate, but these people that want to go raise 5, 10, 20 million, and then you see the average valuations now for Series A is something like $40 million or something like that, which just blows my mind.
Well, a Series A these days, the standards have raised. So that's like a 1 to 2 million. I proved something. It's growing fast. It's starting to take off. So that's still, still a lot going on there. But for valuations and what the deal is with that is if you have a company, a VC values you at 40 million. That means they're trying to put in 5 or 10 million into your business. And because they have a really big pile of money and they can't write $1 million checks, so they have to put 5 million in. So they'll give you that valuation and so forth. But then you're on the drugs. There's no getting off.
And they're protected to get their money back first, no matter what happens.
Yeah. So there's a place for that. And I just think and it's really hard for a VC to be practical. How about I take 10 years and get this thing to 10 million and sell it for 40 million? And it's hard for that just doesn't fit their model. That would be a worst case scenario for an institutional investor trying to pay back their investors. So I get it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, this is Greg Head from Practical Founders. You want to tell us a little bit more about your podcast and your group and how people can follow you and learn more?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. A lot of people have probably seen me if they're on LinkedIn and looking up software like you are. And I've got a podcast, the Practical Founders Podcast. I interview practical SaaS CEOs who have built valuable software companies and sometimes exited or partially exited, or they're up and running and just running it, haven't exited yet. You don't have to exit in any kind of hurry. You get to do it on your time. And people can go to practicalfounders.com to read my blog posts and learn about the CEO peer groups, to get together and commiserate and work on your business with other SaaS CEOs. And, I'll see you online.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I highly recommend following Greg, fantastic newsletter and everything that you do.
Appreciate it. Love your stuff too, Matt.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for being on the show.
Okay.